Hello everyone, welcome to the 53rd episode of DevKami, and I'm Chiru.
And I'm Swimming.
Yeah.
And where's Tristan?
Yeah,
I don't know.
no idea.
He'll be back soon.
Yeah. So let's go to the
start with event.
Yeah, you're gonna cover that first while I set up the Facebook one.
So next week, this weekend is awesome. So we have a blockchain meetup just now. So I don't know what happened. This weekend, on the other hand, will be full of event. So the first one is we have conference, which is the R programming conference, which is why it's a capital R. So
like
this is happening in Sunway University from 9 to 5 a.m. Not sure if you can still buy the ticket because I remember it's full. You can, of course, as usual, you can go to devkami.com/meetups. Then at the same time, at Technology Park Malaysia, there's a World Data Science Forum. Don't know who doing that, but so there's that. Women Who Cook KL is having a Unix and Linux workshop. This is happening at Software AG Malaysia Sdn Bhd at Plaza Central. This is actually an introduction to Linux, and you need to bring your own computer, and it's a hands-on workshop. So yeah, this also happens at the same time. Okay, 9:30 at Software AG Operations Malaysia at Plaza Central, and School of AI have a event on the same day again on ADEX NLP with Dr. Lau Shahan, which happens to have a podcast which I forget the name, but we should find it. And we had another session in the afternoon, text prediction by Purnima Vijendra, and WordPress meetup October at 2 p.m. This is happening at Exabytes Puchong. And that is just Saturday.
Exabyte has an office in Puchong?
I didn't know.
I didn't know about that.
Okay, so if you happen to be want to know what is data science and whatnot, Drop Street Education. I don't know where it is, but they have an event.
Yeah, at their office at Cap Square.
Oh, it's actually at Cap Square.
Yeah,
so
this is actually
this happens in the morning. So it happens to have a leave or whatnot. You can join them, or ask your boss to send you. On Wednesday, we have a Data Council talk happening on Wednesday. I do not. Oh man, they actually have an event somewhere, but forget the venue somewhere else. Let me try to find it. So either way, that's event until next week. And also something off topic is we also have PyCon Singapore happening in Singapore next week as well. 10 to 12. The 10-11 is the conference day, and on Saturday is the workshop, which I will skip because I just decided to walk around Singapore and it's expensive, so there's that. So next week, I hope to have DevKami in Singapore. I hope.
Hey.
I doubt it, but let's see.
Yeah, we'll be going around. We'll be going off because it's a year end. Most of it is will take time to go off.
Yeah.
Let's see.
Let's see how it goes.
Yeah.
So
I forgot to place my mic properly.
Okay.
Right. Can you hear me now properly?
Yep, much better.
Okay.
So
and let's go to the what are the juicy bits happening around?
TensorFlow 2.0 is out.
For somebody who's not into machine learning or deep learning, what special feature that came with
quite a few things. quite a few things. It's more functional now instead of session based. It's a bit magical in my case. So you actually call chaining functions to get things done now. And now they got Keras as the first class library. So they got first class support now for Keras, so that it's easier for you to build a network and various infrastructure support and whatnot. So it's actually a big release. Then we have Micro K8S. So it's Kubernetes for embedded devices. I do not know how that works.
And this thing about Windows 10 BitLocker, this encryption no longer trusts your SSD because sometimes SSD that reports that they can do hardware encryption, but actually they didn't.
Right.
So they decide to blacklist certain versions or manufacture and enable software encryption all the time.
Right. Then we have let's see. I think Warp already covered.
Yeah.
Multi-part TCP is upstream now.
Yeah, and HTTP3 is being in the work.
Yep.
Yeah.
Let's see. Quite a number of those that I missed.
Yeah. Do we want to go to our main topic for today? What the hell?
Oh yeah.
Shit. I have to flag this. I have to flag this episode now. What is actually microservices?
I have no idea.
You know what is? Yeah, I guess most people have no idea as well. It seems to be the sort of thing that everybody has to do. Yeah. But do you want to do a bit of elaboration on what you think is microservice?
Actually, I do know some official definition, but I just never do it before.
So the big official definition?
Not official, but 10,000, and in orbit of Earth view. So essentially it goes like this. One problem with building software application is so one problem with building software application is that sometimes you have to build one thing. So that's what they call monolith. So the thing is, each different team are do things differently, right? Do things somewhat differently. So as a result, sometimes you want to integrate code, you got to go with different style, all that. So one way to do it is to split your application into multiple small program into services, microservices. And what a benefit of that happens to be, you can move your each of these services to different machines, so you can throw it at different servers. So in theory, it's more reliable. So one service won't take down everything. In theory, right? In practice, it's a bit more complicated, but it's essentially taking up a big application, split it into smaller, different piece of software that talk to each other. And why is that? It's integration, it's team or whatnot.
So it means that it's a solution for team who doesn't want to work with each others.
Well, yes and no. For big company, they have good reason for that as well, because their application, because each component is important enough, and then they worry about scalability. I don't know. That's the very part that I do not know for sure, the big use case of microservices.
For me, that situation is in that kind of situation where you don't want to introduce so-called volatile changes, or you don't want to do that kind of shaking the stability of the application. And you can, if you are in have to maintain an old monolithic system, and Nicholas say modularization, but without having to commit the whole thing into the existing system or existing code base. So let's say you have a COBOL project, you don't have to rewrite the whole COBOL project. And you just let's say I want a very fast email dispatch system, and I just have a very specialized and very highly optimized email dispatch. So for me, it's a transition to replace certain features, but it is not mutually exclusive with the feature set or like in general. So in my opinion, you can have it's I don't think it's related to the code organization. You can have microservices that live within a monorepo, but you can
Mm-hmm.
have a monolith system that is based on a lot of repository, like what we did with Git submodules last time. So it's not
Uh-huh.
necessarily the way we organize the code, but it's more like we organize the services.
Right.
But yeah,
But
why do we need microservice? Really?
I don't know. But what's
What are the
okay?
some
Here's
of
my
what
question.
are some of the examples microservices that you can think of?
Okay, so you can think currently. Okay, so I do not know microservices, but currently to build an application now, you will split up your caching service. So that's a separate thing. You already split up your database somewhere else. That is given. Your queuing system is there. Your
Yeah.
email system, that's different. That's definitely a external service now.
Do you consider
Uh,
them as a microservice, like different, like let's say SMS gateway, email gateway, your proxy
I
server, your cache server?
I don't
You,
know. That's the
what
thing.
is the line between microservice and the,
But
the take for granted service?
yeah, but you also have other things, right, that we don't usually have. For example, your oh, I need to go off topic a little. Uh,
Yeah, to
uh,
is that related to some history again?
yeah, it is. So when I do a Cobol application in a bank, so what we do is services are split into operation. So, for example, different team will receive different reports, and sometimes for our operation to continue, you need to talk to different services. It can be through network. Often it's files. So a cool example is the credit card system need to talk to a fraud system to decide whether to flag so that they know how to flag a transaction. So that is one service. Fraud detection is the
I think it's
function,
in
and
your
that
words, it will be some highly specialized system
yeah,
that is
and
not necessarily fit into the existing one, but it can be consumed by the what we call it, the core system.
correct. And it's not just, but it's different core system talking together. For example, the credit card system need to talk to the core banking system that actually hold your account. So what happened is then the account, that's the one that is called the essentially ledger of how much money in your account are able to use. So what happened is then when the transaction happened, when we call running a batch job, it's actually talking to different service and asking for different file to be processed. And so, for example, your credit card, you need to know how much balance, right? That is on another service, not necessarily on the card, for example.
My other question will be a response to your is that do you really need microservice for that?
No, each of those services are complex as hell.
Okay,
It's not micro
it's,
for the first place.
so it's to limit
But
the complexity. Yeah, to make it
yeah,
to,
yeah,
to make each
yeah,
more
go on.
agile, is in so that you don't break a very each of this a very complex system, but you don't
Mhm.
actually break it as
Right.
long as it consume and spill the same kind of results.
I'm going to put it this way. Uh, so would a command be a service? A commenting system be a service? Let's say you had a blog site. Let's say you had a complicated blog site.
Yeah, like discuss is that a service? I
Yeah,
would
is that a
consider that
service?
as a service.
Yeah, right. Your donation system, would that be a service? So
Yeah.
your super complicated blog site, now you had a donation button. Is that a service? A donation that link to each post or each account. User profile. Next one is user profile a service.
It can be. But do you
Yeah,
really
it
need
can
it?
be, right?
Do you really need it?
Yeah, do you really?
I
So is
think,
that the line? What's the line for that service?
yeah,
That's a problem I do not know about microservice.
yeah. Do you have any
You
opinion
see,
on that? Because I have some opinion about that.
my thing is software development. Each services roughly translate to the bureaucracy. So one thing, the reason why I brought up bank is each of those services a bank talk roughly translated to different department and roughly translated to the how the bureaucracy of a organization looks like. Microservice implies that you have different team working on several different components. Yes, you may have one team to work on all components, but in a bigger organization, it roughly translates to a team that works with one or several of
If
the
I want to
components. So
say,
those,
like, you'll be like every department probably has their own really big product that
yeah,
you have to consume. But
yeah,
I think the source of misery that came with the controversial I mean the controversial part of microservice is people actually uh what can they zealously for split up all the components, all the features, like
yeah,
into, let's say, let's just assume that it, for the sake of easiness, is everything as a REST resource.
yeah.
So
Okay,
some, if you split them a lot, like let's say the user login is one, user profile is one, let's say the
yeah,
purchase record is one, then
yeah,
you'll be creating a mess for yourself, not just by uh, uh, like making sure that each office is up, like the the process management, the deployment.
yeah,
Uh, you'll be miserable to trace like where things went wrong, and also like whether, oh, of course it's good because if one small component is down, the whole
yeah,
system is still up. But that can be designed into a monolith system as well. I mean, like
yeah.
if I want to consider Erlang system is one,
Mm-hmm.
is considered a monolith, but they have
Uh-huh.
a fail-safe
Okay.
that is built in. So
Right.
a fail-safe can be actually built into a monolith system. But for me, it's just that when the bottleneck for that certain task is reached, and you don't actually need to scale the whole, like let's say you don't have to scale the whole CMS. You just scale, let's
Yeah.
say the heaviest one is actually processing the, let's say you have some special AI engine that process the kind of leads. So you can
Yeah.
actually just scale the lead engine instead of scaling the whole CMS system.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So on the other hand, not everything should be a service,
Yeah.
right? That's what you
And
mean.
because if you put everything as a service, you have the responsibility to make sure that you monitor them and also
Yeah.
to trace them properly, because you have no idea, like sometimes when you're in a multi data center kind of situation, you don't know whether uh, is latency is bad between data center, or
Yeah.
like even host to host communication. Those bottleneck has to be taken in mind as well, unless
Yeah.
I think unless your issue is that bad, that the kind of overhead that you introduce with certain separating certain services is acceptable, then I think it should be okay to use it. Or else you're trying to make it harder to maintain than.
Yeah.
Uh, but a monolith, it can be. It's not supposed to be mutually exclusive though, but depends on how you how do you
Model.
organize your code, because you can have a monolith code base and a monolith system, but the system can be like, I think you heard of like feature flag, that you can actually have a subset of that monolith system running elsewhere, and
Yeah.
then you
And
like
that
just do a
often
load balance.
happen.
Yeah.
It often happen. I like to give another analogy, which is also weird. The Unix design is do one thing small and one thing
Yeah,
well.
but
But
don't overdo
yeah,
it.
yeah, Yet nobody actually built the whole application using pipes and Unix socket.
Yep.
There's a reason for it. Partially is because it's actually easier to just write one application for a team and just do things.
Also, IPC is very
Yeah,
expensive.
correct.
Yeah.
I need to.
Inter-process communication. Yeah. Yes. It used to be pretty expensive. So for them, they want to share as much memory as possible. Previous.
I
But
need to share a link.
even a lot of
Yeah, go on.
the like those articles that mention the rewrite and stuff, but most of the time it's actually just because they have a better, they clean up the logic, so of course the new code will
Yep.
perform better, especially when you first started, when you inherited an old project with the domain figured out. But because when the project is initially developed, the domain is still, like, let's say, unknown, it can be all around the place, very hard to maintain, very hard to read, and also the performance might be horrible because of that.
Yes. So, and often when people think of that, they never think about network. So, my link I'm sharing right now,
Yep, this is the one
it's called policy
of
policy of
distributed.
distributed computing. So, what happened is you essentially try to add more things, assuming things works for you. Uh, RPC, whether network or otherwise, is not reliable, despite what we think, right? Uh, in fact, everybody that use RabbitMQ will know network will drop. Everybody that configure database before knows sometimes weird things happens.
Yep.
Everyone that so every time we have a cache server, then we need to make sure it's in the right the socket is set up correctly, IP defined correctly. Hopefully, your server didn't change address and all that for your services to work. So network is a real problem because when we do microservice in the modern term now, is almost exclusively means a REST based microservice or HTTP based microservice, right? So it almost
Do you
means that
consider like a queue worker as a microservices? Because for me, I don't see them as microservice. But if you put in like service oriented, the SOA, then they actually take this RPC communication as I'm repeating once. Is this RPC
uh,
as a microservice? But do you consider them as a microservice? Because I don't.
okay, what's the line you call why first? That's the first reason.
As in
So
what?
if you look at definition, why you don't consider that a microservice? So the problem is the way for me that often when we use offline. Okay, there's two approach for this, right? Think about it. One of the first thing to think about is the reason why we use uh, a queue-based worker versus why we build it this way. The short answer is every time we build, the reason we build a worker service is because try to run is slow. So a cool example is your machine learning algorithms, okay, your recommendation system. Okay, those things might be fast, but every time you try to add more data and all that, those things can be slow. So we do not split it up because we want to turn it into a service. Split it up is so that they can return asynchronous response. So that we can actually ask the service, "Are you ready? Are you ready? Are you ready?" Until they say we're ready and send something over. Uh, so it's for me maybe the answer is maybe because the motive, the reason for us to set up the worker is not because we want to make a service. We do not. It's not the same reason why we build a microservice. The way I build microservice is try to scale out the process. But
Yep.
when we use service workers, whether Incubase or whatnot, we are doing it for performance reason. As in doing it because it's too slow and causing our response to timeout. So that's the reason. That's the reason why we had a worker. So it's the design and motivation behind it that makes it maybe. Doesn't mean it can't be done. I'm just think it's overkill because RabbitMQ can queue up really slowly,
Yeah,
and we
but
do not want to do
RabbitMQ
that.
also comes with a pretty steep price, like the cost to serve the resources that it needs.
Correct. So which is why you don't use that for, you use it for other reasons, service bus and whatnot. Enterprise software tend to do that, but not to build microservices. You can probably, it's probably a bad idea.
Until you the what I call it, until it is justified, or unless somebody hosted the RabbitMQ for you for free, then it's fine.
Yeah.
But until you can justify
Yes.
the cost, then sometimes direct communications, like let's say direct calling, I'll be sticking with using REST as the direct HTTP as the easiest
Correct.
example. It can be other things, but
Yes.
it can be as simple as just calling the service directly.
Yeah. Correct. So I'm trying to think enterprise solution that do that. Because integration solution do have that, but they are not microservice in a way that each of the services are pretty big. The bank one already covered. I'm thinking something like, okay, again, department. Your accounting department might need to access to your sales record, for example. So they have a worker to push data to their database. Um, So traditional service bus with RabbitMQ and all that tend to be, okay, I go to off topic again, but tends to be meaning each department need the information, so they build something to read the information through. It's not always a two-way thing, not always thing. It's why when we read about enterprise service bus, you're talking about like top sub, you're talking about things like push. It's very RabbitMQ like, instead of TCP like, I ask you get, I ask you get.
Yeah.
So
RPC.
what? Yeah, correct. So RPC can do that, but let's not go there. What else about microservices? I don't know.
No, it's not because we've been covering the negative. What are the positivity from
Oh, the
using that?
positive. One good thing is a different team. Do it properly. Do it properly. You can put your. You can actually organize your service. Uh, Again, back to our super complicated block. A payment service down theoretically will not bring down our block, for example. Uh, in theory, uh, when our I don't know, I don't have good use case for microservices. I'm so sorry. I know
I do have
big
some.
company have it.
No, I
Yeah,
do have some. Is first is the one that I mentioned to replace certain part that you need to scale, but you don't want to scale the rest of the components.
yeah. So that's your
So
machine learning service,
and
your
also
analytics service.
and also in the case of it's very useful in when you have a load, when you have a load balancer in front, you can do like sort of a blue green deployment or A/B testing quite pretty easily.
Yeah.
Feature flags.
Yeah.
So, but
I can see that as well.
I do get bitten by trying to split everything too small before. So I think unless
Uh-huh.
you need it, it's actually fine to put them into one system that can run together, but also provide the
Mhm.
option to run them as a separate. I mean, it's depending on how you organize the code.
So
As
how
long
do
as
you?
you know,
Never mind. I finish first.
just
Got my
like
question.
in the case of I think Django is more familiar. It's like everyone is you try not to do because you can write them as an individual app. You can still connect them
Yeah.
together, stitch them together
Yes.
as in you have a main, but individual app can be ran as its own right if you do the
Yeah.
organization properly. But
Correct.
yeah, but you are not limited to. But also don't be like silly like put all sort of feature into like you have a lot of small apps that
Yes.
yeah, I mean it's in the end it's just finding the balance of do you really need it
Correct.
to and I mean sometimes of course but the reason that we do it is because it's fun or
Yeah.
we're curious like we want to try it out do certain things in other languages then
Yes.
yeah but um do not blame microservice though. I mean, when it fails or something. But microservice,
Yeah.
the cost of microservice is for me. The point is if you host multiple of them on the same host, you
Mhm.
is if you are hosting them on the same host, it doesn't make sense. Just scale the application to probably use more process
Yeah.
because I mean and also shit I forgot what I should say if you put let's say you want to run 10 of them on the same machine it's not actually help out and the
No.
bottleneck is actually the this IO or network IO
Yes.
so you
Correct.
actually need to figure out the bottleneck uh you can do it easily by doing don't be too silly like you can do naive benchmark that
Mhm.
sometimes that work but
Yeah.
what very important is to gather metrics during uh, production or during runtime because you we will always face like weird issues in products like let's say certain clients tend to not following certain let's say HTTP client they don't follow certain standards or
Oh
they are being
yeah.
too
So
strict
many of those.
or they are being too strict to the standards sometimes
Yeah.
that we use to let's say because sometimes like web server we tend it's designed to be a bit lenient so when
Mhm.
the client is too strict it might cause issue or sometimes clients they have bad network so the they are not exactly timing out but I mean they time out at the right moment or something like that all these things
Yeah.
needs to be gathered so
Yes.
and but also you can see like every kind of stuff things that we do we introduce overhead because nothing is free so in the
Yes.
case of like in service discovery or in the recent popular one remote tracing they are very nice remote tracing actually show you what happened down the chain but
Mhm.
gathering the information itself is pretty heavy so unless you need to the, just stick with whatever that is that you're familiar with first.
Yeah.
So
And the thing is, how much will you have to actually set up your monitoring and stuff?
yeah, yep. And you have to get used to it. You have
Yes.
to,
So
and also I think this is a misconception that people say like uh, monolith doesn't scale. Sometimes depends on how you put it, and also
yes.
um, that monolith is slow to develop. It's not agile,
Mhm.
but in certain cases, because of how things is tightly coupled, like let's say you develop everything within a Django application, it might be sometimes faster to do it within one code
Yeah.
base than trying to figure out.
Hmm.
In the case of um, let's say server to server communications, you have to make
Hmm.
sure that they actually follow the standards. So in the case of REST, it will be very messy. You have to make sure you update the documentations that the server is still receiving the same input and I mean giving you the same outputs. And also like the solution like generated documentation like if you use something like gRPC or any RPC
Hmm.
generator there's still an overhead that of work that you have to do so because it's all about analyzing the projects.
Right. So if you don't have time to actually look at it, it's better to stick with monolith. Otherwise, uh, there's good
That's a,
reason for it, and if
that's
there's
a good
absolutely
reason
good
why
reason
most
for it, go
startup
for it.
there's good reason why
Uh-huh.
most startup they stick with Ruby on Rails or started with Ruby on
Yeah,
Rails.
it get things done, and sometimes we
You
just don't
gradual
want to think of, yeah, but I can
identify the
see some
bottleneck.
benefit though.
I think identify the
Yeah.
bottleneck first. What
Yeah.
what Ruby or can face is probably the CPU and memory constraint.
Yeah.
But most of the time, when the app scale, most of the time it is so. I mean, it's actually we're going off microservice already. We are talking about
Yeah.
scaling. So most of the time,
Yeah.
the scaling. I mean, the easiest way to scale is add a cache layer and
Yeah.
optimize the SQL query if you're on a SQL database. Most of the time, it's a bet.
Mhm.
I mean, especially if you're on of course, if you're on ORM, sometimes the SQL statement that generated might not be that optimized. So, adding a
Mhm.
caching rate layer and optimizing the database might actually let your application to stay for a bit longer than trying to
Yeah.
like come up with a way to rewrite everything, because there's a lot of, if you look around, there's a lot of articles out there when they say they get, especially the one that is on uh, Reddit recently.
Hacker News. Okay.
Yeah, Hacker News, is that they reroute their PHP project to D and
Yeah.
get
Mhm.
10 to 15% of performance improvement, but then they realize that it's actually an optimized as a SQL query. So in the end, they didn't actually use the D code in production because they noticed that they just need to optimize the PHP and their
Yes.
SQLs. So yeah, of course, within the acceptable range lah. Obviously, when
Mhm.
in I'm sure that the memory usage, the memory bottleneck is slightly lower. Not bottleneck, but memory usage of D is definitely lower than PHP itself. But
Mhm.
if you optimize it, it's the range is still, I think, still, as long as it still runs cheaply, is still being acceptable, because onboarding people on a new technology is much harder than, I mean, scaling people is much harder than scaling other things.
Yes. Arguably,
Oh,
D is old, but the adoption is low. So that's the
yeah.
thing.
I think the problem
Even
with D
for
is off topic. Is I think the problem with
yeah,
D is they started with a proprietary compiler.
yeah,
So yeah, just like some languages within that era, they chose a proprietary path, even though the stat specification might be open, but the compiler
hmm
is not. So people
yeah,
cannot participate.
yes. So on the other hand, so to talk about Django, which I'm more familiar with.
Yeah.
Sometimes the application is we don't there is silly thing on the ORM side or that, but often we can actually split those applications into multiple
Mm.
servers, and that's fine, right? So because often the processing is on the we push to database. So even organization like Instagram, they're a big Django shop. They didn't abandon it and use a new language. They go crazy over machines and all that. Apparently, it's reasonable enough that they keep it for a while. So that's that. So yeah, but on the other hand, we already do components in many ways. So for example, uh, okay, let's say I'm not saying that organization already use things that are out there. Uh, things smaller like OAuth, right? Those are already a service. We
Yeah,
already
OAuth
use
is not so good.
services for them.
Yeah, OAuth is not
Huh?
small. OAuth is not small. Yeah,
Yeah,
Arguably
but
is
it's a
Arguably is
monster, right?
everything that relates to authentication and authorization is a monster behind.
Yeah.
But
But what happened is you split it up,
yeah,
right? By
split up,
functionality.
because you don't want to write a new login system and a new user management for all the projects,
Yep.
especially
So
when you try to make everything as an external service and you want to handle the what call it the access management.
yep. So which is why we have SSO. On the other hand, yeah, SSO is their own monster because permission and stuff. That is another
But
This is
Open
another
Connect,
application.
Open Connect is actually a pretty. It's actually an improvement, even though it's still a bit. Some parts are still a bit messy and hackish, but I like the the direction that they've been through, like previously, like OpenID, then OAuth 2,
Mm-hmm.
and the new OpenID Connect. I can see like the improvement and also uh, in a way ease of implementation. I'm not sure if it's my technical maturity or things are getting easier to do.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah.
But okay, fine. It's not a microservice. Authentication, SSO
Do you consider that as a
it's not a
microservice?
microservice. I
Yeah.
don't know. It seems big, but
What's the
it's
line? Yeah.
there
We
are
just call everything as
functionality, right?
I think we need to agree that microservice is not about the type of services. It's
Yeah.
about you having a lot of specialized services. It's
Yeah.
not a
In a,
I thought now it's like a adjective for this situation where you have a lot of services to do to work together like like a microorganism that's work together like let's say some like fungi, you know,
yeah.
or coral.
Yeah. True. No,
They are
you're
not
right
necessarily
in
bad,
that case.
but I think the cause of misery for a lot of people, because a lot of people there's a lot of complaints about that out there, like, oh, it's no longer the era of microservice. I don't think
Yeah.
there's been an era of that. We just just change the names of certain things all the time. I mean, we encounter certain phenomenon and we give it a new name and it's a new phenomenon. But I don't think the age comes and goes. It's been the method is still been around like since like SOA days, and I bet some people back in the days they abuse it
Yeah.
like crazy as well.
Yes.
Like when RPC first
No,
came out,
actually,
I remember like some of the the projects that I were in, like people try to make everything as a RPC call. So it's always been
yeah, yeah,
there.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Yes, it's always been there. So which you might. That's why it looks so familiar. Yeah, it's actually
But I
similar
think the
to
advice is to
how.
figure out the bottleneck and where do you want to scale.
Yeah, because yeah, you're right. So
I don't want to
what
be right. I
else?
want
Oh
you
yeah,
to be.
how
Mhm.
do you make sure everything works for the first place? So let's say one thing is down, then what?
That's the question. That's the challenging part because that is the source of misery for a lot of people. You need to
Yeah,
monitor them. You need to gather metrics because network. Let's say you have a lot of host. You have a lot of servers. Let's say you own a like even like Amazon. You host them on several instances.
hmm,
If they are host to host communication, it network is prone to have hiccups.
yeah,
So we want to know when those hiccup happens. And also we want to
right.
know which host is down and which one is affecting that. So you need a lot of logging. You need to handle the exceptions properly when it happens.
Uh, right.
Yeah, of course, in the case of you just need to write some really good client code, but see, that's part of the overhead as well. You have to do the client, which is the like translation from the transport protocol. So
So
you have to
okay,
do a lot of tests. I think the problem with microservice is it's very easy to test as a small unit, very
yeah.
easy to deploy a feature, but to make sure that it works together, like the integration part is the more challenging part. Like even to
Uh,
spawn them all out
mhm,
to test, I think it's along the line of testing in production or deployed it. Of course, you test out the
uh-huh.
logic, but how do you handle when you how when you I mean when certain real world situation happen? How would you handle it? And that part
And
needs a lot of
also,
logging
mhm,
and monitoring and warning, but also not
mhm.
the that's another topic for another day. Like how like the way of logging, like not too being too verbose that you consider that as a cry wolf and ignore it.
Yeah. It's called alarm paralysis, but that's another story.
Yeah, and I'm yeah.
Um, So then the next question is, often when we build multiple when we try to scale traditional monolith application, we actually have multiple instances running. Then we had a proxy to fall over and all that. It means that now you have to make sure that everything are followed properly, and
Yeah,
hopefully all your
yeah,
instances have the right version and all that. How do you
yeah.
ensure that?
Making sure the version work together is also one. It's actually more towards the way how you format your code. Like you should always like return a
Yeah.
version in part of your header or something like that.
Right.
And also opinion. Uh,
Mhm.
if multiple service are, I mean, if you try to scale the application naively, and they are still like let's say you put them on the same server, and the bottleneck is actually the DSIO, and you still whack
Yeah.
the hard drive like crazy, then you are not actually helping
Yeah.
out. Yeah. So
And
figure out the
okay,
bottlenecks.
so yes, so something like each service, each time on a Linux system that run a program, it takes up memory space. So traditional one application, it may take one process that runs that.
Mm.
And now you have multiple processes with their own stack and all that, which may or may not be bigger or smaller,
Yeah.
but
It
it may not be
shouldn't
helpful in
be.
the first place.
I think the point of converting a certain monorepo feature, monolithic feature, in order to scale into multiple external services, the external services shouldn't be causing strain to the existing provider, like let's say database and
Yeah,
stuff. They should be scaling accordingly. So if
yeah,
let's say if the bottleneck is database, then you should just scale the database instead of the code. So figure it out
yeah,
first, or else you'll be
yes,
doing you'll be creating a what you call it a thundering herd, if or you'll be
yes,
like uh, creating more noise and more straining the existing system. Then
yes,
then the problem with that is you have a vicious circle of keep scaling, yeah, one side, like oh because you created a very heavy system on the database, then you have to scale the database, then you create something else again to like to to it's I don't know, it's actually not a very good analogy, but like a circular effect. Try to be careful
okay,
with a circular effect.
yes.
But
I can understand that. So,
my advice is always caching. Most likely is caching, memory cache or
yeah.
whatever cache that you're comfortable with, and
Mhm.
optimize the SQL command, your SQL statements. Most likely
Use
those
your
are the
index. Use your index.
yeah index.
Standard stuff.
Yeah.
So, what else? What do you think
As to
about
me,
chaos engineering?
good idea, but you still all need sorry, you still need all those support system to be in place.
Right. Okay.
Because
Hmm.
if you have to know, yes, you maybe can recover, but you maybe is actually a very terrible word, because
Hmm.
if and I mean we want everything to be deterministic, so we don't want like we want at least that we know which one is down and something is up. It's always scaling appropriately.
Right.
I like it. I don't think most people need it, but um,
Hmm.
if you're on something like Kubernetes, it's actually something that is pretty much handled for granted, because like there's a guarantee of how much it should be up. I mean, naively, is there's some guarantee there, but you still need all those monitoring to know when something went down, especially the server that handles the provisioning, like it's
Right.
the monitor system, monitor the provision system. Yeah. To what end?
So it occurs to me now that unless you have a team already established and you pretty much have the resources,
If you're staff,
you
if you're
shouldn't
one
worry
person
about it.
staff, don't bother with all this.
Yeah.
Like even
No,
a
in
small
fact, you
team,
had
just
if you
communicate
have
nicely.
yeah,
Yeah, continue.
yeah. So let's say you're a startup with only one server, so don't bother with it. Then. Essentially, that you can only afford one Amazon instance with some database or whatnot. Don't bother with microservice, right?
It's not cheap.
Yeah,
The
it's not
the
cheap.
cost is actually very easy to come up with, but it's not cheap. There's a lot of unless you know what you're doing. Same actually, it's the same. It's the same statement to everything. Unless you know what you're doing, but it's not a
Yeah,
discouragement. Try it out, but to
yeah,
understand the implication that it carries.
yeah.
Everything's comes with a
And
cost.
what often when somebody read microservice, it may comes from big company like Amazon, that Netflix and all that
Yeah,
practice it
but
a
their
lot.
microservices are not micro.
Yeah, and more importantly, when they describe a problem, I call it the big boys problem. You're not big. If a startup, you're not big, so be careful about how they solve problem because big boys problem and our problem is very different.
Uh,
Often it's different. So that's my experience.
Tech is I
So
think the main point of the tech business is to sell solution,
yeah,
selling
yes,
answer or solution instead, because it's a bit cynical. Is a customer doesn't care, so they just
yeah,
want
correct.
what they want. Yeah.
So essentially, want to get website up reliably and
Provide
all
them
that. That's it.
the experience matter, like customer experience.
Yeah, correct. They don't care about microservice, but they do care
Scale,
about
we can
things
always.
getting fast.
I think when we reach the scale, our our situation might be different from the existing big boys. So uh,
Yeah,
do read. I mean, do understand them, like and do read about them. But I think my advice is do not be fixated with their their kind of solution. But the whatever we can learn from them, but their solution might not be suitable for everybody.
yes. So yes, sometimes they do, but not always. So that's that.
Yeah. That's something that we should cover again next week as well. I want to cover like design patterns.
Okay.
It's the same advice. It will be similar to microservice, but uh, I hope there will be more people in to discuss about it.
Yeah, we should cover that
Yeah. Do you
actually.
think people should study or design patterns? I mean, beginners,
Uh,
juniors. Do you think it's helpful? I mean,
uh,
let's save it for next week. So
yeah. I
whoever,
think I will think about it. I'll think about it.
yeah,
But I'll be in Singapore next week.
yeah,
I hope I have
yeah,
internet.
there will be
I
internet.
figure
Is there will be internet.
no, it's whether I can afford the internet. So that's another
Oh, okay.
story.
But there's a
Yeah.
lot of because it's so close. There's a lot of like pretty much cheap roamings from our existing ISP.
Yeah, and also it's the
Not
first day of
helpful.
Python conference.
Okay. Yeah.
So I might go out with people, probably.
Yeah. Do have fun. I can cover it.
Yes.
I can hold the
Yeah,
fort. Nicholas can come
get the
in.
guys. The worst case scenario is I bring in the engineers.sg people on interview.
Yeah.
I doubt it, but let's see.
Yeah. Okay. Time passes really fast. Do we have any questions? Yep, Nicholas. Yep, good debate. You can come in to talk about it.
Yeah,
Uh,
get more people other than
get
us.
more
We are not the
different
only software
voices.
developer.
Yeah, it's actually
We
good
are not the only
to have.
software developer in Malaysia. We are not even the best one around.
Be careful when people tell
So
you they're the best one around. Though.
yeah,
It's
no, we know who is the good one.
No, I mean somebody who claims that if I were going to the oh, Microsoft hackathons, yep, have fun. Yeah, but be
Yeah,
skeptic. Be skeptic when someone tell you they're the best.
yeah. Unless it's Ash, Ash is always the best in Pokemon training
Yeah, but yeah,
because he can be a champion.
He won a Pokemon League recently. I heard at
Finally,
last. Yeah,
yes,
finally after so many years.
he's
Yeah.
he's officially a champion now.
Yeah.
Okay, enough
All
of
right.
nonsense.
Yeah,
If there's
nonsense.
nothing, we should leave there.
Yeah, we should leave that. I think any
Yes,
comments, just leave it there. We're gonna answer it like next week.
yes.
So yeah,
And I
I
will
guess that's
complain
about
about
it.
big boy problem.
Yeah, we're gonna
All
complain
right,
about
so
that. Yeah, bye folks.
so offline. Da, da, da.